and now I will open the floor for Lucia Gharwalová from the Water Research Institute for her speech about the COVID-19 detection in the water.
Thank you very much. I would like to tell you a little bit more about the detection, and I hope you can see all my presentation. Detection of SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater in Czech Republic is a topic which we are dealing in our Water Research Institute from April last year, and I would like to give you a little bit more information about it. Experience with other viral diseases has shown that monitoring sewage for traces of pathogen enables effective surveillance of entire communities, providing a sensitive signal of whether a pathogen is present in the population or whether the transmission is increasing or decreasing. Researchers around the world are now pursuing the same approach for COVID-19 with the hope that wastewater data can supplement some new data for the surveillance of this pandemic. Wastewater monitoring has proved itself to be a very useful tool in several countries. For example, in the Netherlands, they are using wastewater data from over 300 sampling points right now, and they are using them in their dashboard. They are sending testing teams into areas with a higher prevalence of positive samples. Also, Italy has, for example, used older historical wastewater samples from December 2019 to prove that they had already COVID-19 circulating in their area more than a month before the first confirmed case. Here in Czech Republic, the first wastewater sampling took place in the spring of 2020. There are several advantages to building a wastewater monitoring system similar to the one in Netherlands. It is a cost-effective way to monitor a spread of the virus in a larger population. Thanks to this data, we can understand the prevalence of infections or the scale of the outbreak in the whole catchment area. And thanks to this, we could also protect more the vulnerable, the ones who are most likely to die from the infection. These data, together with the results from clinical testing, should give us a clear view on the state of the epidemic. And data from wastewater can show us a trend in which the pandemic is moving. So is the curve of infections increasing or decreasing, or are we seeing stagnating numbers? We can then identify our areas of concern, because we can see whether we should be more testing people more often in that area. We can monitor wastewater also and track the prevalence of the different viral variants on a larger scale. So there are several huge advantages of this approach in the pandemic. The objective of our project was to detect SARS-CoV-2 RNA in wastewater as one of the tools for an establishment of an early warning system, and to develop a methodology for the detection of selected microbial agents by PCR in wastewater. Our pilot monitoring started with the onset of the pandemic in 2020, and we were sponsored by an internal grant from our institution. Back then we started in April, and we were monitoring approximately 40 wastewater treatment plants till June 2020. In that time, we collected 137 samples, which were both grab and composite samples, mostly of untreated raw wastewater. As you can see on the map, we built a rather broad network of wastewater treatment plants in Czech Republic. And even though the infection rates at that time were really low, we were able to catch 20 positive samples in 11 different wastewater treatment plants. In our pilot project, 500 milliliters of wastewater were concentrated through direct flocculation using beef extract. Nucleic acid was isolated by Nuclisense Minimax system. And Eligene COVID reverse transcriptase kit was used for a real-time PCR analysis. Transmissible gastroenteritis coronavirus was used as a process control. And we were only evaluating whether a sample is positive or negative with the quantification cycle value under 40 being considered as positive samples. Back then, we were dealing with 3 different scenarios with our results. The one was absence of the virus in wastewater in locations where we knew that a positively tested person was actually registered. The second was when we got a positive wastewater sample in locations where no infected persons were reported at that time. And of course, the one which we were mostly expecting was positive samples in an area where positive people were tested positive for the virus. Here you could see on this graph an example of a wastewater treatment plant in which we had several samples that tested positive for SARS-CoV-2 RNA. And we also had the occurrence of positive infected individuals in the area. So this gave us hope, or based on this, we knew that this could actually work and that we could use this tool to monitor the spread of the virus better. Thanks to this, we are currently working on a project supported by the Security Research Program of the Czech Republic. This project started in January 2021 and will end in December 2022, but we have started the sampling process already in October 2020, since back then we were dealing with a rather huge second wave of infections in Czech Republic. Up until today, we have collected over 400 samples from 52 wastewater treatment plants. Our biggest aim was to develop a new methodology for the detection of selected microbiological agents by PCR in wastewater. And also during the course of the project, we were looking into new ways to optimize the sampling process of wastewater monitoring. Our new methodology had several advantages over the one used in the pilot project. For example, pH adjustment of the samples was not needed anymore, which is great because we did not contaminate our pH meter. Nucleic acid isolation was adapted for the needs of normal common laboratories. We are now using a 2-step reaction, so we are less prone to inhibition or false negative results. We have established an external control which could give us more precise results on the amount of SARS-CoV-2 in our samples. And the quantification is now based on the SARS-CoV-2 transcript, so we get better results. And we are very thankful that this method was developed in this project thanks to the cooperation with Veterinary Research Institute. On this graph, you can see the results from a wastewater treatment plant in Brno from our current project. And as you can see, the quantification process gives us better predictions, and we can see whether we have correlations between the infection rates and the viral loads in the wastewater. But since the best analytical methods won't give us any results if we don't do the sampling correctly, we were also looking into ways how to achieve or optimization of this process. If we want to sample for the monitoring of COVID-19, we have to first decide what we want from the sample. So do we want to have specific sampling on building levels, meaning, for example, schools, dormitories, hospitals, airports? Or do we want to have a huge city where we could better monitor in sewer lines rather than in a wastewater treatment plant? One possibility is also to work your way down, so from going from positive samples in a wastewater treatment plant and working our way down to building level and see where we have this cluster or where we have these infections. But in all these scenarios, it is important to consult the public health department and see what their needs are and see what they actually want to get from these results. Also, when dealing with technicalities of the COVID-19 sampling, we have to see what we want to get. Composite 24-hour samples have proven themselves to give a better picture of the population in the catchment area. However, in some sampling points, we only can get grab samples if it is possible. We were also looking into ways to adjust the sampling time better to achieve better results. Also, when dealing with composite samples, we should consider whether it is possible to get flow-based rather than time-based sampling. And if not, whether we should incorporate a correction constant in the evaluation of such samples, for example, based on the daily flow. During warmer season or in warmer regions, it is also important to see whether we can incorporate some cooling system during the sampling, since SARS-CoV-2 particles are sensitive to heat. Unluckily, it is not always possible to control the weather and to get the best results and best samples. In that case, we should always consider the possibility to normalize the data we get through some data correction. For example, standardize using some human biomarkers or chemical pharmaceutical markers. We in our project are using, for example, neopterin. Then we also want to collect wastewater data from daily flows, fecal indicator bacteria, etc. See whether we can get some correction, whether we see a spike in some data. And based on this, we can also refine some mathematical corrections in the evaluation of the data, see whether we could incorporate also things like temperature, rainfall, if we really can get the most specific results for that area. We were trying to achieve the best sampling by seeing when we should sample and not just sample 24-hour composite samples. So we had an experiment on several wastewater treatment plants back in March of 2021. And we were sampling on an hourly basis, and based on the microbial contamination and the chemical biomarkers, we could see that the biggest pollution came in during 10 a.m. and 9 p.m. And during that time, probably the most contamination and pollution was flowing in the wastewater treatment plants. This was back in times when people were still at home and working from home office, and the children didn't go to school. So of course, the behavior of people in the catchment area can change. But we decided back then that we will compare 24 hours composite samples with samples which took place from 5 a.m. till 11 p.m. And as you could see that we got way better results for the 18-hour composite samples, so from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. than from the 24-hour composite samples, which are normally taken in wastewater treatment plants. Actually, in 2 cases, we only detected the viral RNA in samples which were 18-hour composite samples. And if we were sampling only the 24-hour composite samples, we would not get any viral DNA RNA detection. Also, we were trying to compare whether it is possible, in case that we cannot use composite samples, not even 24-hour composite samples, to use grab samples. So we had 2 wastewater treatment plants, one bigger, Brno, and a smaller in Břeclav. In Brno, we had 24-hour flow proportionate samples, sampling, and in Břeclav, we had time proportionate sampling. And as you can see, in Brno, which is a bigger city with flow proportionate sampling, the 24-hour composite samples gave us better results than the grab samples. But in Břeclav, where we also had the factor that the composite samples were only time proportionate and the city is smaller, so also the behavior might be different of the people in that area. The results from composite 24-hour samples and grab samples were rather similar. But what are our future goals and aims in our project and work? So we, of course, want to boost national and international cooperation, because without it, we won't be dealing with the pandemic, or we need to be dealing with the pandemic on an international level. We want to create a systematic network for monitoring wastewater for infection diseases spread, so not only when we actually have a problem. And actually, that would be our biggest goal, is to use artificial intelligence for early detection and prediction of the epidemic development through monitoring of wastewater, since there are, as I already mentioned, many parameters which could influence the results, and we need to evaluate them better. And I would like to thank you all for your attention.
Lucia, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. As I see, we have no questions in the Slido. If I may raise a question regarding the acceptance of the method you have presented by the political representation. I mean, is there any interest at the Ministry of Health Management? They would use this method for the COVID pandemic management in the next future?
In this project, we were one of the aims was to develop this methodology. So we gave them our methodology, and they can use it, of course. And since in March 2021, the European Commission ordered all European countries to monitor wastewater for COVID-19. The Czech Republic should also be included in this process and should monitor all cities over 150,000 people. But right now, we don't have any information on whether this monitoring ordered by the European Union is actually taking place in the Czech Republic. So we monitor wastewater only in our project right now, not for the government.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. As we observe the media, follow the reports in the media, there is no mention about using your method for the COVID pandemic management in the Czech Republic, which is a challenge for the future for your team, the institute. Yeah, I check whether there are another questions in the Slido. I do not see any questions, so we can continue with our presentations. Thank you very much, Lucia, for your complex presentation describing the method and presenting the prospects and potentials and challenges of this method. We hope we can follow your research in next future, and we hope to see the results of your research accepted by the political representation in the Czech Republic.